Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of DC vs. Vampires. Today, we're diving into a dark and thrilling chapter where heroes and villains alike face an unimaginable threat. If you're a fan of action, suspense, and epic battles, you're in the right place. So before we dive into this story of betrayal, survival, and the beginning of a vampire war, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss a single episode in this intense new series. Let's get into it. DC vs. Vampires, Volume 1. It was a bright sunny day in New Jersey, with the towering Hall of Justice gleaming under the afternoon light. The Justice League's headquarters was a symbol of hope, strength, and security. But today, something unusual was about to happen on its very steps. From afar, a lone figure approached, moving quickly but with caution. Clad in a long, weathered coat with a wide-brimmed hat, a mask obscuring his face, and dark sunglasses, he seemed almost ghostly under the sun's fierce glare. This was Andrew Bennett, an ancient vampire burdened with fear and urgency. He was on a mission to warn the Justice League, but he knew he was being hunted. The fear that gripped him pushed him faster, each step heavier with dread. As he neared the hall, a car swerved unexpectedly in front of him, and he collided with it, tumbling hard onto the pavement. His hat flew off, skittering away. Panicked, Andrew reached out for it, but it was already too late. His exposed skin began to sizzle under the unforgiving sunlight. Those who had witnessed the fall gathered around, some offering to help. Yet they froze in horror, their eyes widening as they watched his skin ignite and smolder. Flames licked up his arms, and he screamed in agony, desperately reaching for the hat he couldn't grasp. In a heartbeat, a green glow enveloped him, extinguishing the flames. It was Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Hovering above the crowd, Hal quickly diffused the situation. "All right, folks, nothing to see here," he said, his usual charm taking on a reassuring edge. Just another normal day at the Hall of Justice. With a wave of his glowing hand, Green Lantern scooped Andrew up, carrying him into the safety of the hall. Moments later, Andrew found himself in the dimly lit care room of the Justice League, lying on a cot, his skin healing under Hal's protective barrier. He opened his eyes, fear still haunting them, only to see Green Lantern standing beside him, calm and in control. "Easy there," Hal said, his voice steady. "You're safe now?" Andrew struggled to sit up, his voice a strained whisper. "I need to speak with the Justice League. All of them. It's urgent, something terrible is coming." Green Lantern's expression softened with understanding, but he shook his head. "The team's off-world on a mission. They'll be back in a day or two. For now, it's just me. You can tell me." But Andrew shook his head, more insistent. "No, this is about the safety of the entire world. I need them all." At that moment, a young, curious figure entered the room. Zan, one of the Wonder Twins and a newer League member, looked at Andrew with a mix of awe and confusion. "Hey, Hal, what's up with this guy?" Hal threw a look over his shoulder, gesturing to the door. "Close that, will you? Sunlight doesn't exactly agree with him." Zan raised an eyebrow as he closed the door. "Why, is he a vampire?" Hal replied, matter-of-factly, causing Zan to take a half-step back, eyes wide with shock. Andrew, sitting up slowly, noticed Zan's expression and managed a weak smile. "Surprised?" Recovering quickly, Zan shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Guess that explains the pyrotechnics outside." He tried to mask his nervousness with humor, but Andrew's solemn gaze made him sober up. With a heavy sigh, Andrew turned back to Green Lantern, the tension in his face easing just a little. Do you know much about vampires, Hal? What do you know of Mary, Queen of the Vampires? Hal crossed his arms, raising a skeptical brow. Not much. I know about you, Andrew. And about Mary, she's your ex-girlfriend, right? Andrew's gaze darkened at the name, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Mary. She was once my lover, and later my enemy. She was the queen of vampires, ruler of the cult of the blood-red moon. She was the reason there wasn't a war between humans and vampires. He paused, his voice laced with sorrow. She kept the peace. She had the strength to hold them back. Zan's intrigue was plain, but Hal stayed focused, sensing the gravity of what Andrew was about to reveal. But Mary's gone, Andrew continued, the words like a knife in his chest. She's been killed. Without her, the cult of the blood-red moon will rise. They'll see this as a chance to take control, to strike at humanity, and to unleash a war like none you've ever faced. Both Hal and Zan fell silent, stunned. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, dark and foreboding. Zan, clenching his fists, finally broke the silence, his voice edged with anger. We're not at war with vampires! Andrew met his gaze, his eyes holding 1,000 unspoken tragedies. Are you sure about that? Hal leaned forward, his tone pressing. Did you kill her, Andrew? Andrew shook his head. Sorrow and frustration etched into his face. No, I wouldn't never harm her. Andrew took a deep breath, bracing himself to tell his harrowing tale. After Mary's death, I couldn't shake the suspicion that she was murdered. I began to investigate, following a trail of clues that led me straight to the Legion of Doom. Green Lantern and Zan leaned forward, intrigued. So, you think they killed her? Hal asked. Andrew nodded, his face darkened with bitterness. But when I infiltrated their headquarters, I stumbled upon a horror I never expected. Many members of the Legion of Doom were dead, slaughtered by vampires. The room went silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Andrew continued, his voice trembling with the memory. I slipped into their command center and uncovered their plans. The vampires are targeting every human supervillain and hero, removing anyone powerful enough to resist. Once we're out of the way, they'll have no obstacles. They'll launch their war, and there'll be no one left to stop them. Suddenly, his foot caught on something, sending him sprawling onto the cold floor. He looked down to see Lex Luthor, beaten and barely conscious, lying at his feet. Andrew moved cautiously toward him, but as he did, Luthor's eyes snapped open, and with a surge of strength, he tackled Andrew to the ground. Luthor's hand found a splintered piece of wood which he raised to Andrew's chest. "Luthor!" Andrew hissed, struggling beneath him. "Quiet, they'll hear us!" Lex froze, his eyes narrowing. You're not with them?" "No," Andrew whispered urgently, his voice filled with desperation. "Who are they?" Luthor's grip loosened, and he slowly released Andrew. "The real question," he rasped, "is who isn't with them? They're everywhere. They've taken over the Legion of Doom. Any member who doesn't join them gets slaughtered. Soon, they'll infiltrate every corner of the world." Pulling himself up, Luthor scrawled an address on a scrap of paper, shoving it into Andrew's hand. "Go here," he instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them what you've seen." Then, with a grimace of pain, he pulled a syringe from his pocket, filled it with his own blood, and held it out to Andrew. "My blood contains something that can kill them. Take it to the person at that address." Andrew looked at the syringe, trembling. "What about you, Luthor? I can't just leave you here." Luthor's eyes were bleak, resigned. I'm injured, I can't run. They've been trying to turn me, but I've resisted. Now I'm just a toy to them, and they'll come back soon. Kill me, or I'll scream and bring them here myself." Andrew hesitated, his heart pounding, as Luther gave him a final, "Let the world know that Lex Luthor saved humanity." Reluctantly, Andrew tightened his grip around Luther's neck, ending his life as swiftly and painlessly as he could. As Luther's final breath left him, a faint smile crossed his lips. But before Andrew could mourn, a menacing growl echoed through the halls. Gorilla Grodd and Scarecrow, now vampires, entered the room. Grodd's eyes went straight to the empty cell where Luthor had been, then locked onto Luthor's lifeless body. "Sound the alarm!" Grodd snarled. "There's an intruder!" A blaring siren filled the air, and Andrew bolted. The syringe still clutched in his hand. His escape was cut short as he skidded around a corner, directly into Riddler, now also a vampire, who seized him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. "Why are you spying on us?" Riddler sneered, his fangs gleaming. In a flash, Riddler's eyes fell to the syringe in Andrew's hand. "What's this?" Andrew acted quickly, wresting the syringe from Riddler and plunging it into his eye, injecting Luthor's blood. Riddler screamed as his flesh sizzled, and in moments he crumbled to dust, his agonizing scream echoing through the corridors. Andrew didn't wait. He ran, crashing through a nearby window and plummeting to the ground below. Bruised but alive, he scrambled to his feet, escaping the Legion of Doom's stronghold. But he knew they were everywhere. For the next week, he traveled in secrecy, moving only during daylight and staying constantly on the move, haunted by the relentless shadows of his former allies who now hunted him. Back in the Hall of Justice, Green Lantern and Zan listened, stunned. When Andrew finished, Green Lantern studied him with suspicion. "Do you have any proof?" Andrew's shoulders sagged. "No, only what I've seen with my own eyes." Zan shrugged. "Well, I'll go tell the rest of the Justice League." In a flash, Green Lantern's face darkened. Before Zan could move, Hal's ring glowed with power, binding Zan and pinning Andrew to the bed. "What are you doing?" Andrew struggled against his bonds, glaring at Hal. "You're a traitor!" Hal's eyes burned with an eerie red glow, and he smiled, revealing fanged teeth. "Not a traitor, just loyal to my kind." He turned to Zan, who was fighting against his restraints. Green Lantern summoned a construct, a massive blender, and trapped Zan inside. Ignoring his teammates' pleas, Hal activated the blender, reducing Zan to a crimson slurry. Andrew, horrified, stared at Green Lantern. "How? Can you be a vampire and walk in the sun?" Hal's twisted grin widened. "The ring protects me." He took a step closer, his voice cold and sharp. "Did you tell your story to anyone else?" Andrew clenched his jaw, refusing to answer. "Thanks for cooperating," Hal sneered, firing a green ray at Andrew. He screamed as his body erupted into flames, turning to ash in seconds. As the room quieted, Green Lantern calmly cleaned up the evidence. Then, activating his communicator, he spoke in a low, reverent tone. "Master, the problem has been taken care of." Just as he finished, Aquaman entered, unaware of the violence that had just unfolded. Green Lantern greeted him, concealing his malicious grin. Meanwhile, deep in the Batcave, Batman exited his car to find Alfred waiting. "Sir, we had an unusual visitor earlier today. He was a mysterious bandaged man. He said his name was Andrew." Batman raised an eyebrow. "Did he say what he wanted?" "No," Alfred replied, handing over a letter. "But he left this for you." Batman took the letter, his brow furrowing as he began to read. Alfred says, "Oh, and a syringe. He insisted to give it to you, sir." And so, The story ends here, on the brink of an unimaginable war. With heroes and villains turned into monsters, humanity stands on the edge of extinction. The vampires are closing in, and the world's defenders may already be compromised. Darkness is rising, but the true battle has only just begun, and the story will continue in the next episode. Thanks for joining us for this first episode of DC vs. Vampires. We hope you enjoyed the dark twists and epic moments in this thrilling story. If you're as excited as we are for the next chapter, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next in this intense battle between heroes, villains, and vampires. Your support helps us keep bringing you these awesome stories, so thanks again, and see you in the next episode.